All right, we are live. Welcome to Comics Cuts. We're back on Comics Cuts. So I am happy to be back with my OG name. Let's see. Let's make sure it's streaming right. Sweet. All right. So welcome back to Comics Cuts. Comics Cuts, it's back. I figured it was my OG name even before doing the last podcast. So I wanted to bring it back. I felt it was right. And I felt like if I didn't do it sooner, I would be stuck down the line with the other name, Secret Source Authority. So we're back to Comics Cuts. I hope you like the new name, the old name, the new logo, all that good stuff. We got a lot of good stuff to get into tonight. So we're going to be getting into Spider-Man Brand New Day. We have a lot of things. We're going to be talking about the way that comic book movies are being described now with comic book come to life. We're going to talk about the symbiote being in the movie. We're going to talk about my big guess for who Sadie Sink could be playing. We're going to be talking about the villains and some of the villains that have been touched on with some of the leaks from some of the better scoopers out there, and what it means for Tom Holland. We're also going to get into Fantastic Four and Doctor Doom, some brief talk about the Fantastic Four sequel. So some exciting stuff there. Avengers Doomsday. Doctor Doom, obviously we know is the central antagonist, but we're going to be getting into Doctor Strange and Doctor Strange's role in Avengers Doomsday, Secret Wars, and leading into that. So wider MCU, we have some phase 6 stuff going on. And Hungry, if you're here, I know you'll be happy to hear we're going to be talking about Black Panther 3, specifically T'Challa. And then we're going to talk about Superman, the Superman crossover sequel, Justice Gang being in Peacemaker, Lanterns, some Batman stuff with Brave and the Bold. And let me know if there's anything you want to hear me talk about. Throw it into the comments. Chances are I'll be happy to talk about it. I love to take comments from friends, fans, anyone. If you have something you want to hear us talk about, we're happy to. And not us. It's just me, okay? It's just me. I. All right. So having said all that, let's get into this comic book come to life. Listen, I love that we're talking about movies as comic books come to life. I think that's been a big topic of discussion for the past couple of years. And now we're finally have movies that are being regularly called a comic book come to life. It happened this year with Fantastic Four. It happened with Superman. But let's put some respect on the OG Spider-Verse, Miles Morales, okay? That movie, and that was a little different because it was animated and it visually looked like a comic book with the dots, and that's like a big comic book style. But I love hearing movies being described this way. It makes me so happy. If you know me, I love comic books. I love comic book movies. So anything that brings the movies closer to the source material, I'm all about it. Okay. My concern is that I think it could become a quick gimmick and something that's overused when it's not really accurate. Listen, we all love these movies. We all love the art. But like I always say, we have to understand that they are 50% commerce, 50% art, and neither role takes 51%. And I just think that pretty soon you're going to have a lot of studio execs come out and say, we're getting a comic book come to life movie, and the movie is going to suck, and it's not going to be anything like a comic book. All right. So now that that's out of the way, okay. So Sadie Sink. Listen, I think most people would guess she's playing Gwen Stacy. I would love to see Sadie Sink play Gwen Stacy, but I do think it's possible that she could be playing someone by the name of Teresa Parker. So Teresa Parker, for those of you who aren't aware, she's a bit of a deeper cut character because she's not seen so often. A lot of people probably don't know of her, but she is the sister of Peter Parker. She is Peter Parker's younger sister. She's the daughter of Richard and Mary Parker. And basically, she, was just like so far removed. I think her first appearance was in the Chip Zdarsky Spectacular Spider-Man run, which was incredible. If you're looking for a Spider-Man recommendation and you're worried about like ASM continuity and you don't want to jump into that yet, Spectacular Spider-Man, and even if you're just looking for a Spider-Man rec in general, that's a great comic. But I do think that, I think it could be Teresa Parker because it does seem like a bit of a curveball. And why would it be Gwen Stacy, right? Like the more I think about it, the more I think Gwen Stacy is just more of the same because, yeah, she's a different character to MJ, but we just saw Peter sacrifice his relationship with his love interest. So if it's going to be a brand new day and it's going to be different, why would they just continue down the path and be like, hey, you can't have MJ, let's just pull out Gwen Stacy out of a hat. So that's kind of why I think they might give us a curveball with someone like Teresa Parker. You should also know that Teresa Parker is a character that Teresa Parker is a character that she worked for the CIA. So she's not just a character. Like she actually is I don't want to say a hero, but she's at least a player in the game of heroes and villains. She's not just someone that she's not a love interest, but she's not just a companion or a friend. But the other curveball that we got from Alex Perez on this is that Alex Perez was saying that Sadie Sink's character is an ally to Peter and not Spider-Man. So that's one thing that I think is working against my theory. But, like I said, I do think Gwen Stacy would be cool to see. I just think it would be down that same path again. So, Hungry Almighty. It definitely feels like an overused statement. Like if I'm trying to recommend a superhero movie to anyone, I don't use it's a comic book come to life because most people don't read comics. It's a great point. Like maybe people like myself like to hear that, but it does still feel, though, that there are a lot of people on Twitter who pretend to read comics and want to hear things like this. And so I do think there is a demand there. And that's the one thing I would push back on is because everyone is saying they want comic accurate. They want it closer to the comics. Whether they read comics or not, it does feel like people are still saying that. However, what exists on Twitter is not necessarily reflective of the real world. I do still think that most people that go and buy a ticket to a movie they don't care about the comic books. They're not going to read the comic books. They want to watch the movie. If they're not a casual, they might want to know a bit more about what happened in the comic books and get the cliff notes, but they don't care. So I do think you have a point there, but I don't think it's so black and white. You want to know a plot twist? Uncle Ben is alive in the MCU, similar to the new Ultimate Universe. Technically, the only Ben reference is in the suitcase in Far From Home. Yeah, it would be interesting if they brought Ben back in some way. I have been thinking about that since you've been saying that. What also is interesting about that is the fact that in No Way Home, when Aunt May says to Peter, she says, what's the line? Why am I blanking on the line? With great power comes great responsibility. Peter put that into practice in the end. It felt like he heard the line for the first time, and then he put that responsibility into practice when he went into the donut shop and it was like, asking MJ about the scar, and he just ends up, he's like smiling, but you could see him like crying inside, and he decides to walk out. And that was a grown-up version of the character. And I've really been thinking about that a lot lately because it does feel like and yes, none of them were an origin story, but for this Peter Parker, it does feel like the entire home trilogy was an origin story. And we finally saw him come into his own. With great power comes great responsibility at that final moment. And I think that's so important because it reminded me of Casino Royale. You know, the interesting thing about Casino Royale for a James Bond movie was, first of all, it was his first mission. And at the end of the movie is when he finally says Bond, James Bond. And, you know, he didn't say it in the beginning. He normally says that in the beginning. And then they did the barrel, you know, the gun barrel scope shot, which is like iconic in the James Bond movies. It does feel like the ending of No Way Home was that origin story or moment for Peter Parker. And now we're going to get the real Peter Parker who lives by with great power comes great responsibility. Because this entire trilogy, he didn't get that moment of his until the end of it. So brand new day, classic suit, classic Spider-Man, a comic book come to life. They're saying it's going to feel like the animated series from the 90s. It feels like we got the home trilogy as a unit of an origin story for the MCU, Peter Parker, Spider-Man. Okay, so here's the other interesting photo that came from the set. There have been photos from set from Spider-Man Brand New Day that have been going crazy, right? This one is very interesting because, listen, the symbiote had to come into play at some point because they teased the symbiote. They have teased the symbiote with the Spider-Man No Way Home post-credit scene and the Venom Let There Be Carnage post-credit scene. So I'm so over the plot threads that just never get picked up with the MCU. There have been so many of them. And Spider-Man, symbiote, Venom plot threads are too significant to just overlook. You know, everybody wants to see Spider-Man go up against the symbiote in some way, shape, or form. And here's the crazy part, right? Is because we know that Venom is probably not going to be the main villain of Brand New Day, but the reports are saying that Venom is going to be paired up with Mac Gargan, Scorpion, which would make him interesting because, listen, if you've been watching me for a bit, you know I'm not that big of a fan of Scorpion. I think he's just one of those villains that has a cool-looking suit, and because of that, people on the internet see it, and all of a sudden, this guy has a reputation, but if you actually read comics, you would know he's just a boring character, right? How do you make him more interesting? You give him the Venom symbiote. And listen, everyone's gotten the Venom symbiote, right? It's kind of like the clap. You know what I mean? So why not give it to Matt Gargan? I would personally prefer someone like Harry Osborn be in the mix and get the symbiote. But I still don't think that Matt Gargan will be the big bad of Spider-Man Brand New Day. Kind of like we were discussing last week. They're supposedly opening up the movie with a montage of Spider-Man fighting villains since we've left him from No Way Home. Very similar to the montage that we saw in the beginning of the Fantastic Four. And I think that's a perfect way to kind of introduce us to post No Way Home Spider-Man, right? But there's going to be a villain that's pulling the strings with the Hulk and the Punisher and Spider-Man all fighting each other. And then supposedly the three of them are going to realize it and, you know, kind of point their targets towards the big bads. But we don't know who that big bad yet. We thought it might have been Mr. Negative. That kind of got nipped in the butt. It's not Mr. Negative, which I was disappointed by. I'm a huge Mr. Negative fan. He is one of the best villains Spider-Man's ever had. And it's interesting, too, because he's a newer villain, right? He didn't come around until the Spider-Man Brand New Day comic run. So it would have made sense for him to be there. But it's interesting because usually newer villains, they don't always become as popular or as prominent as some of the ones that have been around for a long time. Heritage and legacy are so important when it comes to a character's popularity. So to see Mr. Negative become as popular as he did so quickly is impressive. However, I do think the Spider-Man PS4 game had a major hand in that. So I do think, listen, I think it's going to be Wilson Fisk or Tombstone. I think those are the two characters, unless they're really hiding something and it's Norman Osborn. I think it's more than likely going to be Wilson Fisk, Tombstone, and if I had to give a wild card, I would say Norman Osborn. Those are my guesses for who the villain is going to be, right? Tombstone, he is a manipulator guy behind the scenes. He's always involved in gang wars. He's always manipulating Spider-Man to do his dirty work for him, and somehow Spider-Man always falls for it. And then you have a character like Wilson Fisk, who I don't really need to explain. You obviously, if you're watching the show, you know who Wilson Fisk is. You've watched the Daredevil show, but Wilson Fisk is a manipulator. He's a guy that could totally coordinate the Punisher, the Hulk, and Spider-Man to be fighting each other as well. Okay. Don't forget Aunt May grave was not next to Ben. That's a great point. It opens the door for a lot of potential storytelling if they wanted to say Ben is alive in the MCU. It would be interesting to ground the story. They would obviously have to explain where Ben has been, but it would give Peter an anchor in some form where he's going to need someone in his life that isn't related to his Spider-Man life. I hungry just from talking with you, and now I want to see Uncle Ben too. So you have me on Team Uncle Ben. What villain is so strong that it would require Spider-Man needing the help of the Hulk? It's an interesting question too, and I don't think any of them. I really don't. People love to say Spider-Man, and Captain America fought, and Captain America could have beat his ass. And Tony Stark said that too. But Spider-Man is a fierce combatant. He's a great fighter. He's very strong. He's very skilled. He's very talented. So I don't know. I don't know. And also, MCU Hulk is pretty nerfed. But we'll see. I still think I think it's going to be Wilson Fisk, Tombstone, or who's the other one I said? Or Norman Osborn. And I think it should be Norman Osborn. I mean, I think that would be the best choice just because Norman Osborn is such a big character to the Marvel Universe in New York City. I think they have to have him, but we'll see. It could be anyone. The other thing that's really crazy too is that this movie is going to be the first of the next trilogy. This puts Tom Holland into a league of his own, okay? There is no superhero cast. There's no superhero actor who's ever done 6 solo movies, okay? I don't think you guys understand how big of a deal this is, not just for Marvel, not just for Tom Holland. Obviously, Tom Holland is going to be an A-list star for his entire life because of this. He will be successful, wealthy, adored in Hollywood, all the above for eternity. It puts Spider-Man on a different level. It puts Tom Holland on a different level. It will put the MCU on a different level to have 6 Spider-Man movies. Robert Downey Jr. didn't do that with Iron Man. Christian Bale didn't do that as Batman. I mean, no one has done anything close to that. I don't even think anyone's done 4. I think by the time when he does Brand New Day and that releases it, I think that will already put him in that league. And then he's going to do another 2 on top of that. And then supposedly that's going to be it. That's what Alex Perez was saying. So, okay. Now, So for Doctor Doom and Doctor Strange, we got a lot of stuff to talk about. Now, the rumor is that Doctor Strange is going to be working with Doctor Doom in Avengers Doomsday, which is very interesting because I think I spoke about this last week too. You know, Doctor Strange becomes Doctor Doom's bishop and a right-hand man in Secret Wars. But there's a lot more to that with the time runs out storyline, because Doctor Strange has a lot to do with trying to stop the incursions from happening. And it's interesting because if Doctor Strange is working to stop the incursions from happening, and we know Doctor Doom is setting his sights on those who cause the incursions, I think Doctor Strange could be evil before we even get to Doomsday. And supposedly there is another third movie that is potentially going to be between Spider-Man Brand New Day or Avengers Doomsday and Secret Wars. And Josh from Denim Nerds was saying he thinks it might be a Doctor Strange Time Runs Out project. Now, you know, Doctor Strange with in Time Runs Out, they are trying to prevent the incursions from happening, right? We're already at the point where we're talking about Marvel as if the incursions are already happening. And we know they kind of started in the Marvels, and that's what Photon, you know, she fixed, but she ended up having to go to the other side of the incursion in the other universe. But so, okay. So, yeah, in the Time Runs Out comic, there was Doctor Strange, and Doctor Strange became the leader of the Black Priests. And the Black Priests were a multiversal hive mind that sought to stabilize the dying multiverse by destroying worlds in a process they called triage. And I don't know if you remember this, but basically, there were multiple factions in the Time Runs Out storyline that were trying to avoid the incursions. And when they were trying to avoid the incursions, no one was really successful in doing it. The only person who ever came up with a method to actually do it, Black Swan, she was able to do it before she got to the 616 universe. The Black Priests, I think they avoided some as well. And then there was the antimatter injection device. And the antimatter injection device was the only one who was willing to do it, of course, was Namor. But it blew up the other planet before they collided, so they avoided the incursion. Now, I think this would be a really interesting role for Doctor Strange in the MCU, because back to No Way Home for a second, right? Do you remember in Spider-Man No Way Home how Doctor Strange opposed Spider-Man, and Doctor Strange basically said it's their fate, and in the grand scheme of the multiverse, like we would be better off letting them go back to their universe and die rather than keeping them here and trying to fix them. That was such an interesting dilemma, and I don't think anyone ever really talked about it that much after that movie. But I think, you know, this is one of those moral dilemmas with superheroes that I think a lot of fans from the outside looking in would say they would do something differently than if they were in the situation. Similar to how I describe Civil War, right? I think a lot of people would choose the side of Captain America in Civil War, but then in real life, they wouldn't be able to make the right choice because it's not as easy. And when I watch No Way Home, I got to tell you, Spider-Man is my favorite. I agree with Doctor Strange. I think Doctor Strange was right. Those villains didn't come from that world, and they didn't belong in that world, and they were all going to suffer for keeping those villains there. So Doctor Strange was already kind of seen as opposing Spider-Man from a moral standpoint. I think a lot of people would probably describe that, like all these heroes don't think the same. I hate how people on social media love to say, oh, well, if you don't agree with these heroes, like, you're wrong, or you're a bad person. Like, not even all these heroes agree with each other. Okay. And Doctor Strange, I think that they can move him from that. And granted, I think he was right. I think that was a virtuous position. However, I do think they could pivot that into a different story arc and character growth in a different direction. Whereas, Doctor Strange, he is always someone that is willing to stick to his convictions. He did it in Infinity War. He did it in Endgame. And I think that Doctor Strange working with Doctor Doom makes a whole lot of sense. I think that this adds up. I think it's probably very real. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see Doctor Strange working with Doctor Doom. And I don't even know if they're going to be trying to stop the incursions, because I think if they're going after the people who caused the incursions, that doesn't sound like they're focused on stopping the incursions. Or maybe they think if these heroes that they're going after are still causing them in some way, shape, or form. But, everyone wants to know who is on Doctor Doom's team for Avengers Doomsday. I think it's going to be Doctor Strange. I think it's going to be Clea. And then I think there are going to be some other characters. You know who I could also see on that list? Namor. I think Namor could be on that list. I would love to see an Illuminati project, but maybe it's Doctor Doom's Illuminati. Maybe it is Doctor Doom's Illuminati. What do you think about that? The Illuminati wasn't necessarily about good or evil. It was about a mission. And when you keep the fact that Tony Stark put the Illuminati together behind Captain America's back, because again, it wasn't about who's right or who's wrong. They disagreed with Captain America, and they thought it was life or death, us or them type of a situation. And therefore, I think the Illuminati could be a Doctor Doom-led Illuminati. And I could see it being Doctor Doom, Doctor Strange, Namor. I would love to see Reed Richards on it. Reed Richards is also a very morally complex character, which they touched on that in Fantastic Four. Remember when Sue said, "This is you being you, and you being you hurts me." And, Reed knows who he is. And Reed has a huge guilt complex too. So I think it could be Doctor Strange, Doctor Doom, Namor, Reed. Who knows? But I think Doctor Strange, Doctor Doom, and Namor, I think at least those three are going to be on a team together, at the very least. And if I wanted to double down on my theory, I would probably add I would say it's an Illuminati team. Honestly, I can see Marvel recasting Tom Holland after Spider-Man 6 if Tom decided not to stay. By the way, I 100% agree. I think a lot of people are saying, oh, they'll just go to Miles Morales after. No. I'm not saying they're not going to have Miles Morales. But after they do 6 Spider-Man movies, they're not just going to be like, yep, all right, we don't need Spider-Man anymore. They are going to become so comfortable with Spider-Man merch. That is going to be such a core tenet to their business. They are not going to be like, oh, yeah, we don't need him. Not to say that Miles Morales isn't Spider-Man. I love Miles Morales. I'm just saying Peter Parker's the OG. He's obviously a bigger part of the business. Okay. I feel like we should definitely get a Doctor Strange 3 before Doomsday. I agree. And they should do a Doctor Strange time runs out. That would be the ideal movie. And by the way, that would be some form of redemption from Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. And by the way, Multiverse of Madness there are so many phase 4 and 5 movies that were like 1 or 2 major mistakes away from being good movies. Black Panther 3, if it simply had T'Challa, it would have been one of the best MCU movies. Doctor Strange, if it didn't have America Chavez take center stage instead of Doctor Strange at the end of the movie in the final battle and her being the catalyst to, stopping Wanda, Doctor Strange would have been a phenomenal movie. But they do these things. And, Disney bought Marvel to win men over. And for a while it worked. And then at some point they looked at it completely different and backwards. Josh from Denim Nerds did a phenomenal video on it. I watched yesterday. I definitely recommend checking it out. But okay. To be honest, Marvel be forgetting the rules they established to the incursions. First was the whole a person from another universe can't stay in another universe for too long. Then there was the anchor being, the anchor, it's a mess. I agree. I do think that the universe thing, like there is some precedent to that in the comics, but it's inconsistent. The anchor being is the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. Okay. It is so stupid. Like, of course, here's the thing. I get that the anchor being has to be someone of importance, and someone of significant importance isn't going to be like your mailman, but of significant importance is always going to be a superhero. Like Steve Jobs is of significant importance. Why can't he be the anchor being? But no, it's always going to be someone like Wolverine, Magneto, Doctor Strange, or, it's always going to be a Marvel character that sells comics, not just a civilian. Stupid. All right. What do we got next? The thing about this too is that it's going to set Doom up as the dominant force in Secret Wars, which obviously they need to do, but it's going to raise the stakes because who's going to be on Doom's team in Avengers Doomsday, and is that going to have an effect on Secret Wars? It seems like they're going to be starting some of the plot threads that we all know from the comics in Secret Wars in Doomsday. All right. All right, so I want to get into Fantastic Four. Fantastic Four, they were talking about this movie, and in Alex Perez's Cosmic Circuits drop, they mentioned something really interesting. And it's pretty simple, but it's pretty interesting. Okay. Basically, Alex Perez said how they are going to have to get accustomed to their new universe, and that's going to be a plot thread. And it made me think, because it seems like the MCU is starting to have new themes, and each project, they're trying to have similar themes in their projects. I think that the Fantastic Four being in the main 616 universe and being like a fish out of water and having to live in that universe is going to be interesting. And it sounds similar, not the same, but similar to Spider-Man having to deal with nobody knowing who Peter Parker is. And it's like that fish out of water concept, that was similar to Captain America and the Winter Soldier, where, he was the man out of time. I think that's interesting. And I want to know more about that and what they're going to do with the Fantastic Four sequel. Because I think this fish out of water thing in the MCU is interesting at a time where they're also working on movies like they had Thunderbolts, where it was about a team of outcasts coming together. And that's going to be similar with the X-Men movie, we know. And that's why Jake Schreier is the perfect person to direct the X-Men movie, So I think that's really interesting. And I would love to see that Fantastic Four sequel like right now. But obviously it's going to be coming after Avengers Doomsday and Secret Wars and all that. But there's a lot more to that. And, I just think the Fantastic Four, like being a big deal, is going to be really important post Secret Wars. And there's a lot more to that because we also know that they are talking about so they mentioned Star-Lord in Phase 6, right? And Star-Lord is going to be assembling a new team that is not the Guardians of the Galaxy. And this got me really hyped because we know the X-Men are coming. And when the X-Men come, I'm telling you right now, there's going to be so much focus on X-Men. And I was worried they were going to forget about other characters. But now we're talking about a Fantastic Four sequel. Now we're talking about Star-Lord building a new team. And you know who I would love to see Star-Lord build a team with is Nova, man, okay? Because Nova and Star-Lord, like having a cosmic team would be so cool. And they currently are in this Imperial ongoing storyline from Jonathan Hickman, and that storyline is incredible. It is like the MCU, not the MCU, Marvel meets Dune, but cosmic. It is so, so good. And there is so much more that they could do with the cosmic world, with the Fantastic Four and Star-Lord having his own team. And they're also bringing the Skrulls back, supposedly. So Marvel Cosmic is definitely something they are going to be doubling down on and expanding on. And that is perfect. By the way, this Imperial line, like the Grand Master has been manipulating all these factions, like, Xandar, Wakanda, and all of them to topple and fall, basically just for the Grand Master's entertainment. It is wild. And the Inhumans came back. So that's been pretty cool too. Okay. Could you see MCU doing two Captain Americas, Steve and Sam, post reset like we have two Caps right now in the comics? I don't think they're going to get rid of Sam, but no, I don't think that they are going to be making a Brave New World sequel with Sam. I think they're just going to do Steve Rogers, and they're going to listen. The movie didn't perform, okay, and they need to return to box office health. They're not making a sequel to Brave New World. They're going to recast Steve Rogers. They're going to have a new Captain America. They're going to have a new Iron Man, and that's going to be it. Like, I do not see them doing two Captain Americas like they have in the comics. I think they are going to be trying to. One of the issues that they had was output. They were putting out so much content, and the quantity went up and the quality went down. And what you have to understand about having that scenario is that everyone's getting more product, but that product is bad. So like you're dealing, it's such a bigger burden, because if you're watching the same amount of stuff and it's not as good, that's one thing. But now you're watching more of it, and more of it sucks. So they got to trim the fat. And in order to do that, I think they are going to shelve Sam having his solo movies. I don't think they're going to shelve him as a character. I think they really like Anthony Mackie, and I like Anthony Mackie a lot. I love Sam Wilson a lot. I like the movie for what it's worth, okay? But I'm aware that most people didn't. So I do think they're going to just have one Captain America getting solo movies and one Captain America for solo movies and the other for Avengers movies. Exactly. So now, the other interesting piece here is Black Panther 3. Okay. Here you go, Hungry. We are going to be talking about T'Challa. Now, what I think this might be their biggest mistake they ever made, was not recasting T'Challa. All right. Wakanda and T'Challa are too important for Marvel's universe to not have. Well, Black Panther was such a good movie, and they followed it up with what would have been a perfect movie had they just added T'Challa. And he just has too important of a role in so many storylines in the Marvel universe as a whole to not have him. And they're talking about Black Panther 3 for Phase 6 right now. And we're finally, we're not learning anything about it. We don't really know anything about it, but they were talking about it. It was mentioned in Alex Perez's drop, and they just got to get back to having T'Challa. And my theory is that Kevin Feige recently was talking about, like Hungry and I were just talking about, Kevin Feige was just talking about, and he said this, I forget to which one of the Hollywood trades, but one of the big ones. It was an interview. And he doesn't do many interviews. So when he does, he's saying stuff that he wants us to hear. And here's the crazy part. He said that they are going to be recasting older characters from the MCU once after Secret Wars. And here's the part that you're going to want to hear, is that if they are going to say they're recasting Iron Man and they're recasting Captain America, I think that is Kevin Feige planting the seeds to soften the blow for the people who were so anti recasting T'Challa. And by the way, that is why I think they chose to not recast T'Challa. You can have a different theory than me. That's fine. That's what my theory is. I think that they didn't recast T'Challa because they didn't think some of the fans could handle it. And listen, we all love Chadwick, okay? I've been watching movies my entire life. James Bond, he always was recast. Superman has always been recast. Batman has always been recast. That's just the way it works. Movies. And now, if you were someone that didn't want T'Challa to be recast, you have Wakanda Forever, which will always be a beautiful tribute to Chadwick that you could have. But you also have to understand is that Chadwick's brother even said that Chadwick would have wanted him to be recast because he understood how important the character was, both to Marvel and for representation. So I think Kevin Feige made sure to say that in that interview because he wants people to understand that the recasts are coming. And it's not a reboot, it's a reset. But if they're going to be recasting Iron Man and Captain America, no one's going to really have any room to say anything when they also include T'Challa in that recast assortment. You get what I'm saying? Does that make sense? Or they've got some pretty big ones, Hungry. I you know what? I might have to do a video of Marvel's biggest mistakes, and we'll rank them. So the Skrulls are also supposedly coming back, which, this is the problem with putting out a project like Secret Invasion, is that when you bring the Skrulls back, people have a bad taste in their mouth for the Skrulls. A lot of people were upset with how they were handled in Captain Marvel. That has nothing to do with the movie. It just has to do with the fact that I'm saying the quality of the movie or whether you liked it or not. But a lot of comics fans did not like how they were handled in Captain Marvel, and nobody liked how they were handled in Secret Invasion. So I always like the Skrulls as characters. The Skrulls are really interesting to me, but I think it's going to be a really difficult thing for them to bring around and get right. I think they should do it as like a small part of a cosmic storyline first before they have a significant role in anything, just because of how botched they've been handled, right? So now let's get into some DCU. All right. So I was talking about Brainiac a lot, and I put this on Threads, and this on Threads got how many? Just under 70,000 views on Threads. So whether the fan demand was there or not, I'm doing my part to build it, okay? Because Brainiac is one of my all-time favorite villains, and we need Brainiac for the Superman saga. Brainiac is such a good character, and what's interesting about the Superman saga is that James Gunn has also said that it is not the Superman sequel that he's almost finished writing right now is not a direct sequel to Superman. What does that mean? I think we're getting a super family movie. I think that's what it is. I think we're going to get Superman, Supergirl, maybe even Connor Kent, which would be really cool considering we know Lex Luthor. But they got to build it up to more for Connor Kent to happen. But who knows? Maybe it could be Superman, Supergirl. After the success of Supergirl, which I'm sure is imminent, Brainiac is the perfect villain because Brainiac is a villain that arms himself with knowledge that he goes and collects from all the worlds throughout the multiverse and then uses that knowledge to target other worlds and destroy those worlds. What better time to do that than during the AI age, where we're dealing with this technology with no safeguards? Everyone's concerned about the lack of morality that the technology is capable of possessing. Brainiac is that villain that you could tell some next level meta commentary Superman movie with. They got to go with Brainiac, okay? Now, the other interesting piece, here's the crazy part. Remember that thread where they were mentioning how there was the Krypton message where Superman's father, Jor-El, sent Superman to Earth to conquer Earth? Well, check this out. Can you read that? He escaped while others of his world did not. All Kryptonian knowledge should belong to Brainiac. And that's just the panel that I got for you today. So Brainiac could play right into the Kryptonian message. Now, I know there is some discourse of whether the message was real or fake. And, I think there was a Maxwell Lord or, some TV news from the movie that said it's fake. But James Gunn said it was real. So I'm going to go with what James Gunn said. Anyway, I think Brainiac targeting Kryptonian knowledge and using that to mess with Superman could be so iconic. That would go so hard. And listen, a lot of people did happen to say on the Threads post of mine that went viral, oh, they should save Brainiac for a Justice League movie. Newsflash, Justice League is not coming till much further down the line, okay? We don't even know when we're really getting Batman. Until Batman is at least cast, let's hold off talking about Justice League. I want Justice League just as much as anyone, but we're still dealing with people on Twitter saying they think Brandon Sklenar should be Batman, okay? So calm down. However, I do think it is interesting that we have the Justice Gang and we don't even know when we're getting Justice League. You know, I like that James Gunn is unpredictable in this way. Like nobody would have guessed that we would have this version of the Justice Gang before Batman's even cast. So, okay, let's take some chats. Hungry Almighty. And the potential backlash of recasting T'Challa was not the only reason. I think Marvel wanted to do female Black Panther, and this was an easy out for them to do it, given how much they were pushing for more female. Great point. Great point. And I think that some of the people that were responsible for the decision 100% had that train of thought. 100%. Granted, it's not a one-man decision or a one-woman decision. I think some of them definitely pushed it that way for that reason. And it's just such a shame. It's such a shame. You know, and listen, I'm fine with female characters. I loved the first Captain Marvel, okay? I loved Wonder Woman. Like, but don't take one of my favorite characters and make it female because you're not willing to no. All right. Hungry Almighty. I always tell people imagine caring about Bikini Bottom without SpongeBob. It's a great point. No one cares about Wakanda without the child. 100%. 100%. And it drives me nuts because every time I go and I want to watch an MCU movie, I don't even consider Wakanda Forever because it doesn't have the child. And it sucks because Namor, they did him so good. And let me tell you something, okay? Namor and T'Challa are one of the best rivalries in comics, period. And we were robbed. As great as that fight was with Shuri, like that fight should have been one of the most iconic MCU moments, and we were robbed. So they got to bring T'Challa back. Slav, welcome to the chat. Thanks for coming. Kev Co, thanks for being here. Brainiac with today's indifference towards AI is kind of perfect. Exactly. That's what I'm saying, bro. That's what I'm saying. Hungry. I don't know if I said thank you for being here, but thank you for always joining. I appreciate all your time and support. I know your time is valuable. So for all my guys that are always here, thank you. I appreciate you. And to newcomers and whoever's in here, thank you. I appreciate you. All right. So Hungry Almighty says, I could see Brainiac being the villain of a Superman sequel. And then we find out that Supes only defeated a copy and the real Brainiac is coming as a main villain for the first Justice League movie. They could do something like that because not a lot, but there have been some modern Superman or comics in general where Brainiac isn't an alien, but he is an AI. So they could easily do him as an AI robot and that be kind of like Brainiac's pawn, almost like a Doombot, and then build up Brainiac even bigger for further down the line with Justice League. So that would be really cool. Yes, indeed. They need Brainiac. Fingers crossed. 100%, bro. 100%. And by the way, you want to talk spectacle? Just look how cool Brainiac looks. He's such a cool looking character. And in the age of characters getting hyped up on social media for looking cool, I think Brainiac is going to do pretty well. Okay? I think that's a crooked smile or a typo. But Kev, if you got something you want to say, please let us know. Okay. So now we got Black Panther 3. All right. So, all right. Okay. So now, did you guys watch Peacemaker episode 1, season 2? I thought it was great. I really did. I thought it was great. I always liked Peacemaker. I liked him as a character. I have read some of his comics. It's pretty cool. I love the line, I love peace so much, I'm willing to kill everybody to get it. Now, the other thing about Peacemaker, which was really interesting, was the Justice Gang. The Justice Gang and Peacemaker together is just like the perfect pairing, right? But it does make me think we are going to be seeing more of the Justice Gang. And I think that the Justice Gang could pop up more and more. But you know who I really want to see? I really want to see Amanda Waller. I always loved Amanda Waller as a character. I love shady, corrupt politicians or people that work in 3-letter agencies. They just make good stories. And I think Absolute Power, which was the comics event of like 2023, I think it was a couple years ago, and it was all right. I mean, DC hyped it up to be like the best thing ever, and it wasn't as good as they made it out to be. But the Amanda Waller piece was pretty cool. Amanda Waller is a great character, and I think Amanda Waller would be great with the Justice Gang. I want to see Amanda Waller deal with them. And Vala Davis. I'm going to butcher her name. I should have gotten it right before. My bad. But whatever. Anyway, I thought she was great. I would love to see that get tied in, and I love that. I think Bloodhaven was mentioned. For those of you that don't know, Bloodhaven is the city near Gotham where Nightwing operates out of. So now we're getting into Arkham, Belle Reve, and what was the other thing I just mentioned? Oh, Nightwing's city. And we know we're going to be getting Batman and Damian Wayne, but now we're talking about Nightwing's city. So I think that we're probably going to see Dick Grayson. And it does seem to me that James Gunn is leaning into, at the very least, the idea of Batman and Superman having like the family of, what's the word I'm looking for? Sidekicks, the families of sidekicks, the super family, the Bat family. I like the Bat family. I'm not like crazy on it as much as a lot of people are. I just think sometimes it can get excessive. Granted, when done right and the stories are good, like you could bring a lot more into them because all of these characters have different relationships with different characters in their own right. And that can make it really interesting. Kind of like Colonel Kane and Batgirl, for example. So anyway, it does seem like they are going to be diving into this super family thing with Superman, which leads me to believe with Batman, it's going to be much more than just Damian. And now we're talking about Bloodhaven. So that made me think about Nightwing a lot. What's really interesting is that we don't even know who's going to be playing Batman yet, which is kind of crazy, right? Like Batman is the biggest character. And I was wondering about it also because Batman, like I used to think we were going to find out who he was before the end of the year, but I don't know if that's the case anymore. I think that now, when I think about Batman, I think that they are handling it very delicately because they have to worry about, they want to release 2 Batman movies. They want to release the Batman with Pattinson, the Batman Part 2, and they want to release Batman, the Brave and the Bold. And like I always said, and James Gunn confirmed it after I had said it on my previous show, is that they were never going to release 2 Batman movies in the same calendar year. Of course, why would they do that? They want to make sure both of them have enough room to succeed and thrive. And in order to do that, you have to make sure each of them has space. So when I think about that and that mentality, I think about the fact that when they announced the Batman casting, it's going to change the dynamic for a lot of things in terms of DCU. I think that people are going to be more focused, maybe not more, but some of the focus from Superman is going to have to go to Batman. It's not like it's going to increase. Some of it is going to be diverted. And in order to do that, I think James Gunn is being very careful about the Batman casting. But he did say in a podcast that I listened to last week that Batman the Brave and the Bold is coming along well. I imagine that means the script is coming along well, and they probably maybe the screenplay, which is, for those of you that don't know, the script gets written, but then the screenplay, which is basically the script along with its blueprint for how to film it and what, special effects would happen along with the lines. Listen, I love movies. And in order to really talk about movies, you also have to understand a bit about how they're made. So I'm just obsessive like that. I'm passionate. I don't hear about something and say to myself, oh, well, that's stupid because I don't, as a cop out, cannot learn about it. Like, I'd rather learn about it. But that's just me. Cat on the keyboard. Okay, all good. Are we going to get a Lex cameo from prison? I really hope so. You also have to understand, in a lot of stories, Superman and Lex have worked with each other. It's not just Lex isn't always at odds with Superman. Yes, they're always going to think differently, and Lex is naturally evil by nature, so he's never going to stay on good terms with Superman. But even the Superman run that I'm reading at this very moment, Superman is working with Lex, and he actually cares about Lex, and he cares about Lex's well-being. Lex Luthor got hurt, and Superman blamed himself. And if you're curious, it's Superman by Joshua Williamson. It's the current ongoing run right now. It's great. Similar to Clayface, what if we get more projects with some Bat family members while we wait on The Brave and the Bold because of Matt Reeves Part 2? Imagine we get a Nightwing HBO Max show. That would be fire. That's actually a great idea. I don't think they're going to do anything like that. I think they are trying to move pretty quick, as fast as they can with Batman. But, that would be sick. By the way, I love the Titans show. That was great. And Nightwing was cool as hell in that. But, yeah, that would be a great substitute because Nightwing is Batman's sidekick who's evolved into his own role. And, it could scratch that itch for sure. I'd be fine with a summer 2028 Brave and the Bold release date, but I would love to see a Nightwing HBO Max before then. I agree. And I think the Batman is slated to come out in 2027. So I do think that they will probably push off the Brave and the Bold to be December of the following year. I don't think they're going to drop them within 6 months of each other. I do think they're not going to come in the same year. And they're going to try to distance them. They're not going to come in the same calendar year, and they're going to try to get the full 12 months apart, if that makes sense. James Gunn said that he expects to read 2 Batman scripts this year. So I'm assuming Brave and the Bold script should be done at some point this year, unless something goes wrong. I agree. And I think I heard him say that as well. The other piece that, it's something I was thinking about. And this is the interesting piece because everybody loves Pattinson. But before the Batman released, a lot of people didn't have faith that Pattinson was going to deliver. People didn't believe in the casting. They thought it was a massive mistake. And then the movie came out and everyone loved it and everyone jumped on the Pattinson bandwagon. You have to understand that when they announced the casting of the Brave and the Bold, the DCU Batman, that actor is not going to only deal with the scrutiny that Pattinson had. he's also going to be leveled up against Pattinson immediately. And I think that they are strategizing around that as well, because it's a PR crisis by design. And they're going to have to figure that out because fans are ruthless and they want to make sure that fans are supportive of the DCU Batman because they need that. I'm telling you right now also, it's not going to be Brandon Sklenar, okay? And James Gunn even hinted, he didn't say it was Brandon Sklenar specifically, but he did say that Hollywood talent agencies are planting fan castings for their clients to get them into the mix. And this Brandon Sklenar thing is so forced. It's such it's an industry planted fan cast, okay? Does that make sense? Do you understand what that means? Stupid. You still want Andy to direct Batman and the Brave and the Bold? You know what? I like Andy. I don't know if he's the right guy for Batman and the Brave and the Bold. I like The Flash, but I think that we need someone who is more of an innovator than Andy was to do Batman, the Brave and the Bold. Because, like I've said before, this Batman, the Brave and the Bold movie, this movie needs to be the Batman movie that is described as a comic book come to life. It is past time for Batman to have a movie that is described as a comic book come to life, okay? And I don't mean this to throw any hate on Pattinson or the Batman, because I do love those movies, that movie, and I do love the Nolan, the Dark Knight movie. But I am just over the realism with Batman. Don't get me wrong. I'm going to see the Batman Part 2 as soon as I possibly can. And I'm still going to rewatch the Batman. I'm just saying it is still overdue, and we've had it with the realism. As much as I enjoy it, we need the most comic accurate version of Gotham we ever had was on the show Gotham, okay? Where they, you know what, I'm not going to say it. I'm just not. Are you on the side of Robin Dick won't be in the Batman Part 2 100%, or there could be a chance that Robin is in the movie, or at the very least, a Dick cameo? You know, I'm pretty sure it came from Jeff Snyder, and I don't look at Jeff Snyder the way everyone else in our space does. I think a lot of people are unfair to him. I think a lot of people are very unfair to Jeff Snyder, okay? I think that there are a ton of scoopers, right? Jeff Snyder is the only one of them who shows his face, okay? He's the only one of them that actually shows his face. And he has a podcast. And all the other ones are completely anonymous, and they just tweet their stuff. Jeff Snyder, he has a paywall. Obviously, not everyone pays for it, and he knows it's going to get out into the internet. But I don't think Jeff Snyder is making fake stuff up the way people talk about it. I think a lot of these scoopers get information and they share what they get. And a lot of the times what they get isn't fake, it's not accurate, or it's changed, or even now Feige is putting out fake information. That's what celebrities do. You know, when celebrities want to find out who's leaking stuff to the press, they send a fake secret, a different secret to 10 different people, and then, some friend leaked secret X to New York Post. That's how they know. I'm telling you right now, Jeff Snyder's the only one that puts a face to it. And I'm telling you also, he's not making this stuff up. Some of the stuff he gets is real. Some of the stuff he gets is made up, but he doesn't know. And some of it is a red herring that's meant to divert people from something else. Okay. And Jeff Snyder is the one who said that he heard Dick Grayson or Robin is in the script for the Batman Part 2. I think it's an odd thing to hear, considering we know James Gunn is working on a Batman movie with Robin for the DCU, and obviously they want to make sure the two are differentiated and separated. So it's odd to hear that. I would give it about a 30 at 40% chance at most that we're going to see Dick Grayson or any Robin in the Batman Part 2. However, if you're going to ask me if I want to see Dick Grayson or Robin in the Batman Part 2, my answer is going to be no, I do not. I think we are getting that in the Batman Brave and the Bold, like with the realism thing. I just think it's more realistic for Batman to work alone. Sorry, it just is. Okay. All right. I like Brandon Sklenar a lot, but still iffy on his fan cast. All him talking about the character sounds like he's being fed lines from his PR team. I 100% agree. And listen, I've never seen him in anything. I do believe that the guy is probably a talented actor. I just don't think he's right for Batman. And here's the thing, okay? I 100%, you nailed it on the head. I think he's being fed lines from his PR team. And you noticed how he said in that clip, he was like, yeah, he's the character I've been reading since I'm a kid. It again goes back to that being closer to the comics. That is what the industry understands is the fan demand at the moment. They get that. And that's why he's being fed those lines. Yeah, I take things with a grain of salt, but there are people really acting like Robin won't appear in the Batman Part 2 just because James Gunn said not to believe Jeff. I agree. And by the way, James Gunn didn't deny it. He just said, the only people that have seen the script are so-and-so. He didn't say it's not true. So keep that in mind too, okay? Listen, I don't like what Jeff Snyder, how he, the way he called out James Gunn recently was a little over the top and ridiculous. But keep in mind, he's the only scooper that shows his face. Slav did have a great video on that, though. I don't know if you saw that. All right. Okay, so the last thing for the night, the lanterns. I'm really hoping we're going to see them in Peacemaker. I don't even think they belong in Peacemaker, but we haven't seen anything other than this damn picture of them two walking on a road, and the most Green Lantern thing we could see is, I always mess up with the banners. I got to get better at that. Okay, so this is the only thing that we've seen from Lantern so far where the green ring on Hal's finger is like the most Green Lantern thing we've seen yet, other than Guy Gardner. But I'm talking about like something from Hal and John from the Lantern show. You know, we know that the Green Lantern stuff is going to look cool and their powers are going to look cool because it looked cool in Superman. But it's about time we see more from this show. And the fact that it's going to be a detective series and most of it is going to be taking place on Earth also makes me wonder what the storyline is going to be about. Because originally when they started talking about the show and they were saying that this show is a space cop detective show, it made me think about them flying around the galaxy and doing cosmic detective work. But that sounds like it's not the case when they say most of it's going to take place on Earth. So I'm curious if maybe it's going to take place on Earth because James Gunn wants to tie them into other stories he's telling, maybe with the Superman saga, maybe with the Justice Gang. But there has to be some reason behind the decision for them to be staying on Earth. And I'm curious as to what that is. There are so many good Green Lantern characters and villains. And I hope that them being on Earth doesn't change the fact of who we're going to see, because I really want to see Tharos, Sinestro, Parallax, and all these characters, So I just hope we see them more in space. but I still want them to be tied into what else is going on the ground with the DCU. I'm excited for Lanterns, but at the same time, I'm worried about Lanterns. Like, I don't want to see it mainly taking place on Earth and not going intergalactic. I hope Hal doesn't die in the end. I agree. And by the way, I don't think Hal's going to die. The more I think about it, like, I just don't think they are going to make that big of a decision. If it was in a movie, that would be one thing. But the fact that they're doing it in a TV show, I don't. I just don't. And the other thing here is, it seems like James Gunn's really leaning into that space where no character, it seems like no main character is like in their own silo, if that makes any sense. So Superman already has Supergirl. Batman is going to have Damian and probably Dick. John Stewart, who seems to be like main Green Lantern, is going to have Hal. So none of these characters are kind of standing on their own. They're all these little groups. So that makes me think they're going to keep Hal around just because, like, it doesn't seem, we're not talking about are they going to kill off Robin. We're not talking about if they're going to kill off Dick Grayson. We just thought that for a little bit because Kyle Chandler's a bit older. But again, I just think he's just someone that's kind of like in the Green Lantern group, if that makes sense. I have an idea for Brave and the Bold. What is it? Because I'm done with the docket, so we can just chat it up for a bit. So, but since you're not a fan of multiple Robins, what if in Brave and the Bold, Tim Drake dies at the end, allowing Damian to fully be around? I actually would like that. Tim Drake, they say, is the best Robin. My favorite is Damian. Listen, I just don't want there to be like 6 Robins. I just think it gets excessive. And when Batman's propping up that many sidekicks, like, it's a lot, and the concept of bandwidth is real. Bandwidth is, think about a highway, the more cars on it, the more time it's going to take to get through. With more characters on the screen, less attention goes to less of them get to shine. So now there's only 2 Robins, which are Nightwing and Damian, with Red Hood appearing every once in a while. So yeah, I would be fine with that. I understand they're probably going to have to settle on at least 2 Robins, and then Red Hood is kind of like his own rogue thing. Like that I get. All right. So Kevco, Lanterns is my most anticipated DCU thing right now. I cannot wait. And I love Woman of Tomorrow, but this cast is perfect. Hal, John, and Sinestro. Yeah. Oh, yes. They did cast Sinestro. Oh, man. I can't wait. Lanterns, I cannot wait. It is my most anticipated project also. Like, we've never gotten a legit Green Lantern, like, universe project. And by the way, I do think that the Green Lantern movie from 2011 is so overhated on. I think it became the trend to hate on it, but like, it was actually good. It just sucks, and people look at it the way they do. But yeah, I would probably say Batman, but just because of the fact that we've gotten so many good Batman movies, I'm more excited for Lanterns. 100%. What up, Travis? Thanks for joining, bro. Yeah, but I gotta say, when it comes to the Robins, like, and here's the other thing too, is they're not I feel like they're going to bring Cassandra Cain in. They're going to bring Batgirl. It's not just going to be Robins. And the whole Bat family is so expansive, you know? I saw something funny the other day. I think I retweeted it, but it was like all of Nightwing's fans are people on Twitter who don't read comics. Don't get me wrong, I like Nightwing and everything, but I do feel like there are a lot of people who love Nightwing and they don't actually read comics. So, but yeah, anyway, that's all I have for tonight. So if anyone's got anything else they want to shoot off or spitball, comment it. I'll give it like another minute and then we'll wrap it up. Tim Drake dying is a big character death as well. Yeah, that is definitely. It's going to be interesting because if we watch Lanterns and they kill off Hal Jordan, then we're going to know James Gunn kind of has the balls to go there. Like it's hard to judge if someone has the balls to go there when it's a new universe and we've only seen Superman and an episode of Peacemaker and Creature Commandos, you know? Kevin, thank you. Thanks for joining. I appreciate your support, time, and all that good stuff. Hungry, like imagine Tim sacrificing himself for Damien in the Brave and the Bold. Bro, that would be crazy. You know what that reminded me of is that panel where Johnny was like flame on in Hickman's Fantastic Four run, or when Wolverine, struck the Orcus satellite in the House of X, Powers of X, X-Men run. That was so sick. Bro, those sacrifices are so cool. That could go so hard. Nothing looks cooler than a sacrifice like that. All right. See you next stream, bro. Have a good night, everyone. Thanks again for joining. Thanks for your time, and hope you enjoyed. Peace.